Major Alexei Ghost Razin lay in the deep shadow of the old factory chimney, the cold, wet clay of the abandoned rail yard clinging to his uniform. He was the point man for a critical hostage rescue operation, now dangerously compromised. The initial extraction window had slammed shut, leaving Alexei and his two remaining team members, a medic and a communications specialist, isolated and surrounded by a superior enemy force entrenched in the derelict complex. He had a fractured rib, the result of a hard fall 2 hours earlier, and the pain was a continuous serrated knife twisting with every shallow breath. His mission had shifted from precision insertion to absolute desperate endurance, buying time for the rear elements to reorganize a safe extraction path for his two men. He suppressed the crippling urge to analyze the overall bleakness of their situation, focusing instead on the only factor he still commanded, the cold, unyielding precision of his next 2 minutes of existence. His discipline demanded the elimination of all non-essential thought, reducing his consciousness to a singular, relentless pursuit of operational survival. The enemy began to execute a deliberate, methodical sweep of the rail yard, using high-intensity spotlights that cut through the pre-dawn gloom. Alexei immediately assessed the threat vector. The light was their true weapon, forcing them to move or expose their position. He whispered concise, unemotional commands to his team members. Medic, cover south. Comms, cover east. Maintain absolute silence. No engagement without my mark. He established a perimeter of 3 individual wills, each soldier relying entirely on the precision and control of the other 2. He fought the searing pain in his ribcage by externalizing the injury, treating it as an operational constraint, a broken piece of equipment requiring controlled compensation. He shifted his weight, using his uninjured side to bear the load, forcing his body into an unnatural, agonizing posture that offered maximum stability for observation. The air tasted metallic and cold, a constant reminder of the high stakes involved in this desperate, close-quarters geometry of survival. He could hear the heavy, rhythmic tread of enemy boots approaching, the sound amplified by the slick, metallic ground. The urge to flee, to break the perimeter and find open ground, was a violent, primal instinct that he had to suppress with immediate, structured mental control. He began a silent internal countdown from 100, focusing on the numerical sequence, using the abstract process to anchor his consciousness and slow his heart rate. He was teaching his body to betray its instincts, forcing it to obey the ruthless logic of the tactical situation. He knew that the enemy was searching for hasty, panicked movement. His only weapon now was the absolute unmoving quality of his patience. Discipline is the practice of imposing silence on the mind when the body screams in chaos. He pressed his cheek into the cold, damp clay, merging with the terrain, becoming a part of the forgotten wreckage of the rail yard. The enemy patrol passed within 5 feet of his position, their heavy uniforms brushing against the tall, dead weeds that offered his only concealment. Alexei held his breath, his muscles locked into a state of rigid, controlled tension. The presence of the enemy was a profound, terrifying sensory overload. The smell of cheap tobacco, the low murmur of their voices, the mechanical clatter of their rifles. He endured the proximity by focusing on a single benign detail, a small, dark beetle crawling slowly across a rusted piece of steel a foot from his face. He made the beetle the center of his universe, channeling his entire mental focus into observing its slow, methodical progress, thereby eliminating the immediate paralyzing threat of the soldiers above him. His endurance was an act of profound psychological compartmentalization, ensuring that the critical threat did not contaminate his operational mind. The patrol moved on, their footsteps fading into the distance. Alexei waited 5 full minutes, maintaining the exact position,
allowing his body to absorb the shock of the encounter. He then slowly, meticulously adjusted his position, the movement agonizingly slow, requiring precise coordination to prevent any audible sound. He communicated with his team members using pre-arranged hand signals, a silent, non-verbal exchange of status and intent. His medic, a young woman named Zara, signaled a strained focus but confirmed her stability. His communications specialist, Igor, signaled heavy equipment difficulty but confirmed the comms link was still intact, if fragile. The collective discipline of the team was their true power, the silent, shared commitment to holding the line, a reliance on each other's professional integrity.
Alexei had to move his team 50 meters to the next section of stable cover, a line of abandoned freight cars, before the enemy sweep returned. He ran the risk analysis. The open ground was exposed to fire from the high windows of the factory. He made a decision. He would move first, creating a controlled diversion, drawing any potential fire, and then his 2 men would follow in the 3-second window of confusion. This was the precision of sacrifice, a calculated choice to accept maximum personal risk for guaranteed team security. He focused his mind on the complex geometry of the sprint, the angle of approach, the point of entry into the cover, the exact moment of his engagement. The pain in his rib was irrelevant. It was a distraction to be ignored, a constant, low-priority signal. He erupted from cover, moving low and fast across the exposed ground, firing a rapid, controlled burst into a high, darkened window, a clear signal of his position and aggression. Immediate, heavy return fire erupted from the factory roofline. Alexei absorbed the impact of the sound and the near misses, continuing the sprint, his vision tunneled by pure, urgent adrenaline. He reached the freight car, slamming his body into the shadow of the steel chassis, turning immediately to provide covering fire. He watched his 2 team members execute the sprint with professional perfection, moving low and silent, reaching the cover point without incident. The disciplined choice had succeeded. The risk was contained, the mission preserved.
Inside the narrow gap between the freight cars, they gained a brief moment of relative security. Alexei used the time not for rest, but for damage control. He checked his rifle, clearing the action, ensuring its immediate readiness. He checked his men, a quick, cold assessment of their physical and emotional status. Zara, the medic, immediately saw the severe, uncontrolled tremor in his hands, a sign of shock and internal trauma. She moved to address his rib injury, but he stopped her with a small, sharp motion of his hand. Mission first. Maintain cover. I am operational. He was asserting the dominance of the professional code over the physical necessity, refusing to allow his injury to become a liability shared by the team. A leader's final command is the control over his own collapse. The enemy realized their location and began a slow, targeted approach toward the freight cars. They were using tactical movement, attempting to pin the team between the cars and the factory wall. Alexei understood the geometry of the trap. They had to move, and they had to move vertically. The old maintenance ladder attached to the side of the tallest freight car offered a dangerous high-risk route to the roofline, but it was the only way to break the siege. He ran the internal calculus. The climb was agonizingly exposed, but the roof offered a clean line of sight for an extraction flare, their only path out. The choice was clear. Maximum risk now for mission completion later. Alexei began the climb, his body protesting violently against the vertical movement. The broken rib grated with every heave, sending sharp, white bursts of pain that threatened to black out his vision. He focused on the cold, rusty rungs of the ladder, treating each one as a separate, absolute commitment. He did not look up. He did not look down. He concentrated on the small, necessary contraction of his muscles, forcing his body to ignore the agony, turning himself into a machine of vertical ascension. He was climbing on sheer, cold, internalized will, the physical capacity long since exhausted. His assent was the silent, absolute refusal to be broken by pain or fear.
He reached the roofline, pulling his body onto the corrugated steel with a final massive heave, collapsing into the shadow of a large ventilator housing. The roof was exposed, but it offered tactical height and a clear line of fire. He immediately established a stable perimeter, covering his men as they began their own climb. He sighted the enemy patrol emerging from the alleyway below, preparing to engage the base of the freight car. He fired a quick, targeted burst, forcing the enemy to take cover, buying precious seconds for his team's ascent. He was fighting a staggered defensive battle, sacrificing his ammunition and his exposure to preserve the tactical integrity of the team. His communication specialist, Igor, reached the roof, immediately moving to the opposite side to establish a secondary firing position. He was followed by Zara, the medic, who immediately checked her rifle, confirming her readiness before even looking at Alexei. Their discipline was total, a shared understanding that personal welfare was secondary to mission stability. Alexei knew he could rely on their precision, their commitment to the code. This was the 0 point of trust, the perfect mutual reliance that allows soldiers to survive impossible scenarios, knowing the man next to them will execute his duty flawlessly, even unto death.
Alexei sent the final critical transmission, a coded burst relaying their position, status, and request for immediate extraction. The antenna, exposed high on the roofline, was a perfect target. He knew the enemy would react to the burst. He immediately ordered his men to change position, anticipating the enemy's inevitable response. The transmission was an act of calculated exposure, forcing the extraction window open through an act of aggressive vulnerability. He felt the moment of cold, profound peace. The mission was now outside his hands, his commitment complete. The focus shifted entirely to survival.
The enemy fire erupted from the factory windows, targeted directly at the roofline. The steel groaned and shrieked under the impact of the heavy rounds. Alexei and his team returned fire, maintaining a disciplined, targeted defense, focusing only on neutralizing the immediate threat vectors. The noise was overwhelming, but Alexei felt a strange, detached calm. He was an observer of his own body's function, watching the professional execute the required defensive sequence. The pain in his rib was a constant, but it was muffled, distant, drowned out by the noise of the rifle and the greater focus of the fight.
He saw a dark shape hurtle through the air toward their position, a fragmentation grenade. It landed 10 feet away, rolling to a stop against a ventilation unit. Alexei reacted instantly, not with panic, but with professional calculation. He shouted a sharp, immediate warning, "Grenade, down!" and threw himself over the explosive, using his body as a protective shield for his two men. The action was instinctual, a final, absolute choice of self-sacrifice for the survival of the team and the mission integrity. He accepted the inevitable cost without hesitation, his discipline absolute in the face of annihilation.
The explosion was a blinding, deafening hammer blow that slammed into his body, tearing through his uniform and fracturing his already compromised ribcage. The world dissolved into a ringing, suffocating darkness. He was conscious, barely, tasting dust and the hot, metallic tang of blood. The initial shock was paralyzing, but he forced his mind to fight the collapse. He heard Zara's voice, urgent, professional, focused, calling his name, immediately attending to his wounds. He forced his eyes open, his vision blurry, but he could see Igor maintaining the defensive fire, the perimeter holding. His sacrifice had been precise and effective.
Zara, the medic, worked with cold, professional efficiency, stabilizing his shattered body, treating his new severe injuries with surgical precision. She was focused entirely on the immediate task, her emotional response locked away, embodying the ultimate discipline of the medical professional. Alexei felt her touch, firm, controlled, and utterly objective, the absolute definition of care in extremis. He forced his voice to function, giving his final order. "Igor,
Maintain fire. Zara, extract the comms gear and secure the rendezvous coordinates. I am non-essential. He was transferring command, ensuring the mission integrity survived his body's failure.
He looked at the face of his team. There was no panic, no despair, only a resolute, fierce commitment to the operational necessity. Igor did not look at him. He kept his eyes on the firing ports, maintaining the rhythmic defense. Zara finished her stabilizing work and moved immediately to the communications gear, executing the transfer of equipment and command without a word of protest or unnecessary emotion. This silent, professional execution of duty in the face of the commander's collapse was the purest form of honor he had ever witnessed. His discipline had forged their collective strength.
The sound of the approaching extraction helicopter was finally audible over the ringing in his ears, a deep, powerful thrumming that signified salvation. Igor used the approaching sound as a signal for a massive, final burst of suppressive fire, forcing the enemy to pull back. The extraction was secure. Zara and Igor, working with a synchronized, desperate effort, loaded Alexei's broken body onto an improvised stretcher. They were the last to leave the roof, the entire action executed with the same precise, unwavering discipline they had maintained since the siege began. There was no rush, only the controlled haste demanded by the mission.
As the helicopter lifted off, pulling them out of the chaotic, fire-lit rail yard, Alexei looked at the fading lights of the enemy complex. His body was destroyed, racked with pain, his mission officially complete. He had chosen the precise moment of sacrifice, ensuring the survival of his team and the mission. He felt a profound, cold calm wash over him, the final piece of a soldier whose discipline had allowed him to pay the ultimate price with professional precision. He closed his eyes, the weight of the moment heavy, yet satisfying. His sacrifice was not a failure, it was the ultimate necessary move in the geometry of their survival.